No, I don't worry about little things like that. And Madam Clerk, if we can have the roll call and posting of the agenda, please?
Member Lopez.
Here.
Member Ramirez.
Here.
Chair McDonald.
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum, and the agenda for this meeting was posted in the City Hall kiosk on Thursday, February 20th.
Thank you. And Mayor Pro Tem, if you'd lead us in the pledge, please?
You happy to? Place your hand over your heart. Ready to begin? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. And I don't have any speaker cards for public comments for items not on the agenda, so we'll go to the consent agenda. Has everybody had an opportunity to read the minutes?
Yes, move to approve. Second.
Okay. Any objections or abstentions?
No.
Then they will pass unanimously.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
would it be okay if we start with item 3 since we have guests from the county here? We could take that first?
Even if I said no, you'd ignore me and do it anyway, so. Yeah,
Of course not.
that's fine.
Thank you.
Item number 3.
Okay, they're buying our delay here. We'll have to change up the slide presentation. Scott Brewer, our EMS coordinator, our emergency services manager, will be making the presentation.
I see we have a new IT person also.
Okay, I think we're good. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, members and staff and guests. I'm Scott Brewer, the Emergency Services Manager. We're going to talk a little bit about the State of California Auditor's Report that was released in 2019. And do I have, yeah, I do have the clicker. I'm looking for the tech always gets you here. Okay. Following the wildfires of 2017, 2018, the Joint Legislative Audit Committee asked the state auditor to conduct an audit of 3 counties, Butte, Sonoma, and Ventura counties. Specifically, they were looking for, to assess how well prepared they were, how well they were prepared to respond to large scale disasters, the vulnerability of certain special needs populations, access and functional needs, before, during, and after the natural disaster. So the auditors looked at Butte County in response to the Camp Fire in 2018, the Sonoma County complex fire of 2018, which I'm sure you're aware was actually about 5 separate fires that all joined together, and then the Thomas Fire that occurred here in Ventura County in 2017. In December, the auditor released a 158-page report. It's a weighty document. I would like to tell you I've read every single word, but I've read the majority of the document and I've gone through it numerous times. So the report found that there were certain things lacking at the state and local government levels. At your request, I have asked Patrick Maynard, the emergency manager from the County of Ventura Office of Emergency Services, and Melissa Livingston, who is the interim director of the Ventura County Human Services Agency, to give us an oral overview of the report and their response to it.
I don't have any slides. So, good afternoon, Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Patrick Maynard, Interim Director for the Ventura County Sheriff Office of Emergency Services. Thanks for the opportunity to be before you today and discuss, as Scott mentioned, a pleasant experience we underwent over the last 6 or so months with the State Auditor's Office. Ultimately, the State Auditor's Office issued a report on our actions through both the Thomas Fire, and they also looked at the Woolsey Fire, as well as our planning that led up to those events. We do have a difference of opinion when it comes to what they actually ultimately issued in that report. But what I will say is we're able to take those recommendations that they made and kind of develop a pathway for the future in terms of trying to implement them to the best of our ability. Many of the recommendations that this audit report makes don't necessarily provide the tools or resources to get us there. So it's going to take all of us working collaboratively as a community to really put our heads together and figure out what it's going to take to accomplish some of these things. Additionally, the report solely looked at the county and what the county is doing to plan for vulnerable communities, for instance. This isn't just a county responsibility, as we all know. Cities have a responsibility to do that. The county has a responsibility, as does the state. again, it's going to take us at the end of the day to really work together to make this happen. One thing I would like to highlight is the unprecedented disaster that we went through in 2017 with the Thomas Fire. This was one of the worst things we've seen in our county, and we ended up evacuating upwards of 100,000 or so people. To the best of our knowledge, we experienced no issues related to a lack of access and functional needs planning. There were challenges, as you would expect during a disaster. It is a disaster, but there were no insurmountable challenges that we experienced with that. And I don't think that was a matter of coincidence. I think that was a matter of effective public safety work being done, effective planning being done in advance of the incident, and all of us working collectively together as a community to do good work, to come together in a time of need and really make stuff happen. So again, we appreciate the auditor's critical look. We do respectfully disagree with a lot of their points, but we do look to improve. There's nothing wrong with improving, and we do look to improve. One thing, did that get passed out? Scott's going to be passing out a document. It's an improvement matrix. The auditors made several recommendations. Again, some of those recommendations we're still looking at, trying to determine how we best implement those recommendations. But by and far, we're looking to implement them to some degree across the board. Again, I want to be clear. This stuff that's listed on here, you'll notice who the lead agency is, but in many of these items, you'll see that we look to partner with the cities to collaborate on these things. It's going to take all of us working together to accomplish them. So I will respectfully not use too much of your time and go through each one of these. I'll leave some of that to Melissa Livingston, and with that, I'll hand it over to her.
Good afternoon. I'm Melissa Livingston. I'm the interim director of the County of Ventura's Human Service Agency. I also have a responsibility for incident command for mass care and shelter for the County of Ventura that's delegated from the California Department of Social Services to social service entities. So that's why the Human Service Agency is involved in mass care and shelter. And I will agree with Patrick. We don't necessarily agree with all of the findings that came from this audit, but what we do agree with is that we believe that we could have and should have been more inclusive in our process of planning with the disabilities and access to functional needs population. Up to the point in time of the Thomas Fire, we had not recognized a significant event in scale that helped us truly understand what we might need to do to mobilize a larger cadre of resources to support mass care and shelter across our county. Up to that point in time, the Red Cross, the entity that's our primary mass care and shelter response team, has effectively addressed the issues that we've had with mass care and shelter. What we found in the Thomas event was, for the first time in our history in Ventura County, the Red Cross struggled with their ability to meet the needs across our county. That was complicated by a number of issues, mostly because a number of their volunteers had been mobilized and had volunteer fatigue. They had been involved in the hurricanes that had happened the prior year. They had been involved in the Sonoma fire. So what we found was we had a number of volunteers who were deployed, fatigued, and many of them on evacuation, something that had not happened in our county. So we had a number of things working against us in that respect. But what we found out during that period of time was that we needed to be more responsible about being prepared to set up shelters. And so I want to speak to the audit talks about us being more inclusive in our planning and response, and we agree with that. It also talks about our shelters having a greater degree of amenities that are needed in order to support the disabilities and access to functional needs. What I'd like to do is talk about what we were doing prior to the Thomas event, what the Thomas event allowed us to do through the after-action reviews, and also through the participation of all cities, the Red Cross and the county, including Scott Brewer, who participated in our mass care and shelter plan review, is to stand up a plan that goes beyond just a first responder plan, but actually looks at the importance of engaging the community in that plan. So we have been working on a number of things that I think are setting the stage for us to be ready across the county, from a local government, city and county, as well as a community perspective for future events. Our mass care and shelter plan identifies all the roles and responsibilities of those prime partners. We're developing an MOU between all the 10 cities and the county and the Red Cross so that we can have consistency and continuity in how we address events. We are stockpiling through as many funding sources as possible all of the supplies that we need, and we are positioning those regionally so that cities and county and Red Cross can have access to the amenities that they're going to need to meet the needs of our disabilities and access to functional needs population. We are also embarking upon a community needs assessment, and we will be engaging all the 10 cities in that process. That community needs assessment is going to be following best practices that come from FEMA, from a whole community approach, and recognizing that it's not just local government's responsibility to respond to a disaster, especially large disasters, but it takes the entire community. But that community needs assessment is going to recognize that a very large portion of our population is defined as disabilities and access to functional needs. We recognize that more than 50% of people that show up, individuals that show up in a shelter, have a disability access to functional needs issue. Disabilities and access to functional needs can be children. It can be homeless individuals. It could be pregnant women. It could be individuals that have English language proficiency. It could be someone with a chronic illness or just a temporary injury. It could be an elderly individual. It could be individuals that have physical, cognitive impairments and disabilities. So it's a very, very broad definition. And so the community needs assessment is going to look at going into each of the 10 cities and recognizing each city has a different unique set of needs, and assessing the needs of the community, actually reaching out to those community groups that support the disabilities and access to functional needs population, listening to the voice of individuals with disabilities and access to functional needs, so that we can, one, understand what our assets are that we currently have, then determine what are the needs of these groups, and what are the gaps and what are the opportunities that we have to fill those gaps. We'll be looking at providing equal access and doing an equity assessment across all 10 cities in order to better understand that population. And then we'll invest in working with the community to help educate that population, because it's not solely local government's responsibility, but we'll be looking to the community and those groups that are trusted groups with those special groups to come together and help them understand what do they need to be better prepared, and then what do we need to do to be better prepared to meet their needs during an event. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, as well as Patrick.
I don't have any questions. I appreciate the presentation, and we'll get to the other two panel members in just a second. But as government, we're not the only ones going through this exercise, and I know that I sit on a government advisory panel for Southern California Edison, and I was at a meeting in Irwindale last month, and one of our discussion points was the public safety power shutoffs. And we asked, what do you do to help the people that are using medical devices that rely on electricity? And the response was, well, we're not really sure who those people are because we don't have a current database. And their response kind of left me a little bit surprised. I would hope they would know. They do have a program that we're now advertising on our public channel about people can subscribe to Edison, let them know of their needs, so that if the power is shut off, that somebody either knows to check on them or do whatever, because their equipment is going to be non-functional. So you're seeing Edison go through this. I sit on a water agency, and we've been talking with Assembly Member Irwin about the new normal seems to be fires throughout the state of California. Yet when we send our crews to some area they're not familiar with, they may or may not know the flow rates of the equipment they need to use. So we've asked Assembly Member Irwin to consider modifying legislation that makes the color coding of hydrants unique or the same throughout the entire state. So if you see a red-capped hydrant in Southern California, it's the same as a red-capped hydrant in Northern California, and you know what the flow rate is for that piece of equipment, so that your equipment, and Chief Bass made the good observation of, well, a good engineer will catch that anyway, and that's true, but it's nice if they know ahead of time, what they're going into. So it's interesting. I think sadly this is the new normal, that we're all having to look at how we do things. It's not the same as we've done in the past, and I appreciate your efforts, Mr. Maynard's efforts, Mr. Brewer's efforts, and everyone's efforts in making sure that we try and prepare for the next onslaught of whatever happens. And unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever be at 100%, because every time we get ready to do something, something new pops up, and we have to sit back and readjust. So thank you very much for the presentations. Mayor Pro Tem, any comments?
Yes, thank you so much for coming. I'm so pleased to hear of this, and it's been something that I've been very concerned about, just not because of the fires, even way before, because we know we are expecting an earthquake that may really impact our community, the whole state perhaps, and we are pretty sure, some people are sure that we may have difficulty accessing water. A lot of our water comes from state project, and there's a potential for the loss of that water, and what do we do, et cetera. I do have some questions though, because first of all, we know there's the earthquake, and now we have the COVID situation with people, and I think there's a lot of unnecessary fear. I talked to Dr. Levin recently, and he said the more dangerous thing is the current flu that's going around and affecting a lot of people, but now a lot of people are panicking about COVID. Do you want to say something about that?
Full disclaimer, I'm not a physician. I did go to paramedic school, but it's been a while. So I was in a briefing yesterday with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and learned quite a bit about this. One thing I would like to address for the sake of the committee and those in the room is a little bit about what they're actually doing out at Point Mugu in regard to the temporary quarantining of travelers. I want to make very clear, these are travelers. They're not patients. They are asymptomatic, meaning they have no symptoms of any type of illness. These individuals arrived at LAX, were screened by medical professionals at LAX, and ultimately determined they did not have symptoms. However, they met certain criteria that required them to be quarantined. Nationwide, we've experienced just a handful of these folks. We're actually very surprised to see one actually present locally, as we just started this yesterday. But again, these are travelers. They are not patients. They're being housed at the base for 14 days approximately to be observed. Their temperatures are taken daily.
Government expense?
At government expense at this point, yes. And again, it's very important for people to understand that these are not individuals that actively have been diagnosed with the coronavirus. If in fact they observe somebody that came off an aircraft at LAX that was symptomatic, those individuals would then be sent to an LA area hospital. So we are not bringing those individuals into Ventura County. Now you may wonder, in the event that we quarantine somebody here that is originally asymptomatic and starts to show some type of symptomology, maybe fever, coughing, consistent with coronavirus, that person would be transported to one of our local hospitals, more than likely St. John's Hospital. I will tell you that the process in which basic body substance isolation is implemented, personal protective equipment, goggles, mask, gloves, is all sufficient to deal with this type of patient. So tools that are already on our ambulances today would be deployed. Those individuals would be transported to the hospital. They would be kept in an isolation room. Soon we'll have actual testing ability locally. Right now we don't. We do have to send tests back to the CDC, but soon we'll have the ability to test and do confirmatory testing and see what's ultimately needed. Oddly enough, in the U.S., the mortality rate remains very low. In a lot of areas, this is easily treated with just IV fluids and O2, oxygen. A lot of people are able to be treated when they become symptomatic. What they're seeing in China, it seems as though people are waiting a long time to get to hospitals to get care, and they're ultimately just not getting that care and unfortunately succumbing to the illness. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you very much. I think it's really important communication about it, because if they're just rumors, they're actually running wild right now.
Sure.
They're out of control. So I think it's really important to get the word out I have every confidence that the military could take care of this as well as our local services. But I do have some questions about the timeline for the community needs assessment. Can you address that, Ms. Livingston?
We're looking at probably launching it in the July timeframe and anticipating that we're going to try to engage each of the 10 cities in that process. We look to have it probably be a 9-month process, if not longer, if we're going to do it right. Again, we want to do an equity analysis in that of really understanding about equal access to information, services, resources across Ventura County, and so that will, make it a little bit more complex in nature. We're also partnering with the Ventura County Community Foundation to leverage the information from this assessment. Because a lot of what we'll be looking at is not only disabilities and access to functional needs, but we'll also be looking at impacts to climate change, as well as other opportunities to leverage this data in a way that we can start to measure the effectiveness of time to recovery and community resilience. And so they're going to piggyback off the work that we're doing and starting their assessment in the spring of next year. So we're coordinating that together.
Thank you very much. That's really terrific. I want to say something about public safety shutoffs because I have a relative who's dependent on dialysis in Los Angeles County. She lives in the district under the Department of Water and Power, which is a City of Los Angeles agency, and they've actually told her that if there is a need to shut off, her neighborhood will not be shut off because of that. Seems very pleased about that, and I don't know if Edison is looking into that. But I also want to say there's a lot of responsibility, not just on the government, cities, county, et cetera, but on the residents. And I know Mr. Brewer has been really doing a great job with his team getting the word out to our residents that there are things we can do now in our homes to get ready. So we are not waiting for the fire department or a paramedic or someone to bring us water, food, medication. We need to keep repeating that, and I just really appreciate what we're doing here, and I'm going to tell everybody to listen to this presentation online. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Mr. Brewer, I do have some questions for
Yes,
you.
absolutely.
Looking at, perhaps some of these recommendations, is this something that is going to come down into the CERT team or the training that you do? Will these recommendations impact any of the training that you do?
Yeah, it certainly will. I think many of the recommendations have already been implemented, both in our community education programs as well as our CERT programs. As a basic example, one of the things we rely heavily on when we do community education is a leave behind, which is we call it our Ready and Resilient preparedness booklet. One of the big issues that came up was, if I do have to evacuate, what do I do? What do I take? We've already added sections to this, which weren't previously in there, about what to do in the event of evacuation. We've now distributed, since the update, over 10,000 of these locally. Talking about evacuations with our CERT members and in our CERT training is a big issue. And one of the things we know is that people will often look to the members of the CERT team who are wearing that green helmet and that vest to provide some direction within their own immediate neighborhood. And our word is, if you're told to evacuate, don't wait, evacuate. Be prepared to evacuate, anticipate, watch local media, get official information through VC Alert, through local radio stations, through the media, through our website about what the directions are, and then be prepared to go, and don't wait. There's a real problem that we have, and many times, is that people don't want to leave their homes. We understand that. Evacuations are something we take very seriously, and it's a last-ditch resort to save lives and protect people. And so we weigh the factors very heavily when we make the decision to ask people to evacuate. So we need to make them understand that when we say evacuate, it's everything else has been exhausted. So we're really trying to get that word out. So yeah, we're working very hard to make people understand that. Also, what Member Ramirez said is, people have to take personal responsibility. They have to be prepared in their own homes. My closing remarks at CERT training as well as community outreach is nobody cares more about you and your family than you, and nobody can take better care of you and your family than you. And I also say 99% of your ability to do anything about a disaster is gone once the disaster strikes. So we really need to, we have a responsibility to take care of people that can't take care of themselves. But the hard part is when you add into that factor the people that can take care of themselves but have not taken the most basic steps to be prepared. So yes, we're definitely, oh, and by the way, CERT is also now working with the Red Cross. We're adding an optional training module beginning with our next CERT class. It won't be in the one that's currently occurring, to have them learn how to help set up a shelter. So we're kind of melding our CERT training in with the shelter operations through the Red Cross so that those people, we're also hoping that the same people who are motivated to take CERT training will want to do more. If their immediate neighborhood isn't affected, would they then come and be our volunteer resource to help set up a shelter? So many things are in the mix and all spurred on very much by the experiences that we had with the Thomas Fire and with the Woolsey Fire and the subsequent disasters. So.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate the information, and I think it was a realization by many groups throughout the community soon after the Thomas Fire that there were areas that we weren't prepared in, or we forget if we're
Sure.
if we're not in a situation of what we can all be doing, like you said, personally at home and individually throughout the community. So thank you for the information and the work being done on this.
Absolutely. I just want to close with a report, said, and this is taken directly from the report, we recognize that no amount of planning and preparedness can guarantee success in a natural disaster, and particularly given the scale of the disaster. And I've been involved in emergency management planning for over 35 years. I have to tell you that the Thomas Fire was unprecedented. There were 2 deaths during the Thomas Fire. One was an unfortunate firefighter who fell into a canyon that was on fire, and another one was a woman who, while evacuating, was involved in a traffic accident. To evacuate the number of people from the large-scale areas that we had to evacuate with only 2 deaths is amazing. When you look at the Woolsey Fire and you look at the number of people that were evacuated, close to about 125,000 people between LA and Ventura County, and the amount of area, the amount of time, this is really a success of emergency management, not a failure. And so while there are many, many things in the report that we need to take very seriously, we need to take a hard look at what we do. Also, I think we do need to take a step back for a moment and say, these are really measured successes on the part of emergency planners and emergency managers. And I really want to thank the representatives from Ventura County that took their time to come out today. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to thank our guests from Ventura County too, and I would submit to the committee that this perhaps is something that would be beneficial for all of council to hear, and I'd ask Mr. Nguyen if we could do a time certain presentation at council, maybe a 6 o'clock meeting or whatever on a light night, and invite our guests back for everyone to hear, if they're okay with that.
Yes, absolutely. Can I add something?
Sure.
I would like to ask both our fire chief and our chief of police if they would like to say anything about this. I know that we sent our officers to help with the evacuation in Ventura and guard properties from looting, and I know that we have mutual aid. Our firefighters went elsewhere when there were fires, and I think it'd be important for just to have you say a couple words if possible.
So this was a very unique situation for all of us, and we saw how detrimental it could be to the residents, and we sent literally everybody that was at work that day off to support Ventura City. At the same time, we did a recall to backfill our station so we could still provide a service here. This was far-reaching. It wasn't just the fire departments there, but as you indicated, OPD was there as well. They helped the process of moving people out of the areas and then safeguarding those vacant areas, because I understand they also ran into some issues there. I don't know if you want to speak to that or not.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I don't have that much to add. Oxnard is fortunate that we don't have the same exposure to some of the fires that some of the other cities do, but we do get impacted by the smoke, especially when the Santa Anas stop blowing and then the onshore wind blows, it blows the smoke back into the city. But we do respond with mutual aid on these big events for every one of the cities that is more directly impacted. Thank you.
So the recommendation is to move this to the full council at some point in time. Is there any additional information you would like to see from out of this presentation?
I think the presentation was quite good as it is. It's just a matter of getting it to all of council and hopefully get a good viewing that night from our constituency also.
Very good. This is a small group to present to. But I mean, it's still beneficial. It's the start. And so it may generate some additional questions on that evening.
And if I can add, Chair, perhaps, once you do have the timeline of the community needs assessment, to plan it around that time, just to make sure, if it's not a pressing item, just so that there's more that we get out of it to get the word out on it.
Agreed.
Thank you. We'll just leave it to you and the city manager to figure out an approach on how to make this happen later on.
Good deal. And we'll try to coordinate it with our guest speakers as well. What they presented was very viable, very strong, and it's important for us to hear it from outside of Oxnard, from our sister or brother agencies as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We'll now go back to item number D1, which is authorization to submit 2 grant applications to Office of Traffic Safety.
Thank you. All right. Good afternoon. So we're coming before you today to ask and request permission to seek some grant opportunities from these 2 agencies here. We've done so in the past. This fire department is very dependent upon grants when it comes to training, equipment, and in some cases, staffing through SAFER. In the last 10 years, we've been awarded over $14.4 million in grants. And so here's another opportunity that comes before us. So we just request that we be able to, well, this is the first step before we go to council for approval to seek it. Both items are together, yes. So the first one we're going to take a look at is the Office of Traffic Safety. One of it is a car seat installation. We've had this in the past where we trained firefighters up. It's a 40-hour class for them to achieve certification to be able to install car seats. Who would have thought, you know? I used to strap mine in for my kids just to make sure it's secure, but it's not always the correct way to do it. And I guarantee you, when my firefighters took a look at it, of course, I got the shameful finger. It's like, you should know better. Oh, okay, but educate me. So that's what we're trying to do. And then we open it up to the public. After these individuals take these certification classes, the company who provides the certification puts out information to the general public, opens it up, and then people drive through literally to have their car seats adjusted. If a car seat is out of date, is no longer functional, we have the opportunity to replace it for free. So it's $43,800 for these individuals to go through the certification for our technicians. We will have 100 safety seats available to hand out to the public for free. And then the Firefighters Association, on top of that, will provide an additional 100 seats to the public. The other portion of this Office of Traffic Safety is regional crash response and extrication. We currently have hydraulic powered equipment. You can't really see it right there. I'm trying to use the pad. Anyhow, you can see that we're tethered with hydraulic lines. New technology now is everything seems to be battery powered. That has come a long ways. So now we're no longer having this umbilical that we have to walk around with vehicles to extricate individuals. We have a piece of equipment now that's free, as I said, no longer tethered, and more maneuverable to be able to extricate people from traffic collisions such as this. Last year, we had over 1,013 extrications at some level, whether it was really minor to pop a door or something significant as that vehicle rollover right there. This is a Ventura County-wide request. Regional is always good. That's the best way to go, because when you go before the Office of Traffic Safety, federal government, they want to see that you are working together with your partners as well. The request on this one, $147,125. I'll talk about if there's any matches, whether it's a dollar figure or a percentage at the end of these slides. The next one we're going to take a look at is FEMA's Assistance to Firefighter Grant Program. Our defibrillators we've had, I think the first ones I purchased were over 15, 18 years ago, and each year they seem to get better. So we're probably in the third generation of defibrillators, so it's time to upgrade. So we're asking for $394,500 with a local match of $35,800, basically to purchase 39 AEDs to replace what we currently have on our vehicles. What we have on our vehicles, if they're still functional, more likely will get redistributed somewhere else and continue to use until they no longer function. One other item we take a look at, one thing we do frequently is we do water rescues in the ocean. Last year we had 29 rescues. So we train up to the life-saving standards, USLA standards. So this training for an academy to train, I'm not sure how many individuals offhand, but it's $22,000 with a local match at $2,000 for emergency training. Next one. Initially, we wanted to go for some replacement monitoring equipment for hazmat because this is a combined grant with Ventura County. We ended up going for wildland shelters, which we can use. Again, we use this equipment frequently while we're off on wildland incidents. Our equipment is aged, so what we're asking is $35,000 with a local match of over $3,000 for 50 shelters and then 40 hydration bags or camelbacks. The shelters themselves, if you ever get caught into a situation where you have a burnover, like the position off to the left, if that was to get out of control, the firefighter will pull these shelters out, basically fill out their tents, put them over them to protect themselves as the fire burns over them. Hopefully, we never have to deploy them, but it's a piece of safety equipment that they have to carry while on these wildland incidents. Hazardous materials training, another one of the specialty disciplines that we have within the city here. We respond to several of those too. To train up firefighters, it's approximately $150,000 with a local match of $13,000. And that's to put individuals at the first responder level. We currently have a dedicated team at Station 7, so what we're trying to do is build a pool of individuals to help us support the operations for hazardous materials responses. Urban search and rescue, another one, technical rescues. PCH is off to the left in that particular slide right there. We do technical rescues frequently, sometimes whether it's above grade or below grade, like off to the right there in ditches. This is $78,000 to purchase equipment and then to train some of our firefighters up to a specialty level. Local match on this one is $7,000. This is it in a nutshell, what the requests are between the safety seats, equipment, extrication equipment, the defibrillators, lifeguard training, the wildland shelters hydration, hazmat training supplies, and USAR training supplies with the local match off to the right. This will not be impacting the general fund this fiscal year, but not until next fiscal year. I think the last time I did this, I remind everybody that we're an all-risk, all-hazard agency, that we do everything. So the last slide I had is us pulling a tranquilized bear out of the tree in the north end of Oxnard. So we not only do that, but we're also reptile wranglers as well. Individual here had it. This is an Oxnard. I don't know why they're happy holding those things. But, I mean, this individual, I guess he raised reptiles. The house caught fire because of the lamps and stuff in there. And this is just only a few of many of the reptiles the individual had within his home. And then, of course, we're always looking out for our kids, interfacing with them constantly one way or the other. The best way to do it right now is the traffic, is the cart seat installations and replacements. In the past, we've done bicycle helmets. And then I believe OPD actually has a request out for bicycle helmets here recently, or? Okay, so something else is coming up. So we're not trying to do the same thing here, but so we'll counter them with something different, something for everybody. And that's it. Any questions?
Just a comment, and this probably relates to the lifeguard training. At some point in time when we get back on our feet financially, I would really like to see us reconsider a proposal to have at least summer lifeguards on our beach, if not year-round, but we're the only beach that's unprotected by lifeguards throughout the coastal part of Ventura County, as I understand. I believe that's correct. And, you know, we project ourselves as a beautiful place to visit. I'd love people to be safe on our beaches when they visit here. So certainly if we can look at reinvigorating that proposal sometime, I would be most appreciative. So, and I'll open it to the committee members, and remember that we have combined both 1 and 2. So if you have any questions, it would be on the whole ball of wax. Mayor Pro Tem?
I totally support these wonderful projects. How likely are we to have these grants accepted?
So I think we're almost batting 1,000 here. From the last grants, the only grant that I can recall that we have been denied was, can you recall offhand?
We did miss out on the AFG last year.
Was it AEDs last year, so we're requesting them again this year. But when you do the regional approach, odds are in our favor.
Thank you. And of course, I do agree with our chair about lifeguards. It would be great when we can find the money. Thank you.
Councilmember?
Yes, thank you. I absolutely support these grant applications. I think it's great opportunities. I have a few questions about the Child Passenger Safety Program.
Yes.
I know you're seeking the support of, or the approval of the grant applications to be submitted, but just wondering more about the program itself and, you know, how it works. Is it just one event a year? Is it 1 or 2? Are there any requirements for anyone to participate? And are there any Spanish specific opportunities
Yes.
for the Spanish-speaking community?
I'll have Amy Van Atta. She'll be able to address this.
Thank you.
Hi, council members. The program that we've promised is 4 public education outreach events. That's the minimum that we'll do for the grant. We will try to exceed that. Of course, it depends on staffing levels, overtime, and backfill, which is all currently paid for by the grant. And we do have bilingual outreach that we will do to support this.
Is there a certain area of the city that is targeted for the Spanish-speaking outreach?
I do not believe it's been identified at this time. The last round that we did in 2014, we partnered with Babies R Us and held a lot of events in their area. We also did one at Station 8 so that we could be on the south end.
And Station 1.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Yeah, we try to make it all inclusive. We try to capture as many people as we can, and we'll put it out on the social media as well. We try, again, to reach as many as possible.
Thank you.
I'll move the recommended action.
And that would be for both items 1
Yes.
and 2?
Thank you.
Okay, Madam Clerk, we have a motion and a second. A roll call, please.
Member Lopez?
Aye.
Member Ramirez?
Aye.
And Chair McDonald?
Aye.
The motion carries 3-0.
Thank you. Are there any items for future agendas?
Can't think of any, or I can think of too many right now.
Okay. Thank you. Then, in memory of the Porterville firefighters that lost their lives tragically, we will adjourn this meeting in their honor. So, thank you very much, everyone.